All right, so there's this new blockbuster, Durandar, and it's making huge waves. But what's really fascinating is that behind all the on-screen action, there's a much darker, very real story. So today, we're going to break it all down. The real versus the real.
I mean, wow. Change spy movies forever? That is a huge claim to make, right? The argument here is that Durandhar isn't just another box office hit. No, it's being hailed as this fundamental shift in how spy thrillers are made, and maybe even a reflection of how a nation is starting to see itself.
So you gotta ask, how? How did one movie supposedly rewrite the rules for an entire genre? And maybe even more interesting, what's the unbelievable true story of crime, power, and spies that inspired it all? Well, let's get into it. Okay, so first up, let's talk about the hero of the story. Because a huge part of the argument is that the spy at the heart of the Durandar is, well, he's a complete departure from the kinds of heroes we're used to seeing. So, forget the flawless, charming agent who wins with a perfect smile. This guy is layered, he's gritty, he's often desperate, he's actually driven by a guilty conscience, which is really interesting. We're talking survival skills over flirting skills, you know? And these missions, they're not wrapped up in a weekend. He spends years on them. We end up rooting for this guy not because he's some kind of perfect Superman, but because he's flawed, he's patriotic, and he's just trying to do the right thing against impossible odds. But look, to really get why this character feels so new, you first have to understand the old formula he's breaking. We're talking about a template that pretty much dominated the genre for years. And when you put them side by side, the contrast is, well, it's stark. The old formula, you know the one. You'd often have a raw agent falling for an ISI agent, bikini-clad heroines, six-pack heroes, and kind of wild, unrealistic CGI. Sometimes, militants were even shown as victims of the state. The Durandar just throws all of that out. Instead, it's unapologetically anti-Pakistan, the violence is brutal and gritty, the action is filmed on real locations, and the soldiers, they are the unequivocal heroes. It's a massive, massive change in tone. But here's where we pivot. Because as intense as the movie is, the real story it's based on, it's so much darker, so much more complex. Honestly, it's almost unbelievable. What you saw packed into a 2.5-hour movie is something the city of Karachi lived through for nearly 40 years. Yeah, we're talking about a time when a whole criminal empire, with its own rules, its own government, was basically growing and thriving right inside Pakistan. And this gets us to this incredible concept of a parallel state. Imagine this, for decades, in a part of Karachi called Liari, the Pakistani government had almost zero control. It was a total power vacuum. The state had basically abandoned the place, and so criminals stepped in to fill that void. They became the government. And just listen to how powerful they were. This wasn't just some street gang. It was a fully functioning state within a state. They had their own borders, with their own guys guarding them. They had their own courts to settle fights. They had their own tax system, collecting money from all the local businesses. They even had their own armed forces, so well equipped they were using rocket launchers in street fights. And get this, they had their own intelligence networks. Just incredible. So, okay, who were the main players in all this? Let's put some faces to this real-life conflict, because honestly, these characters are more cinematic than anything you could write in a script. Okay, so first you have Rahman Dacoit. They called him the Parallel Home Minister. This guy was a feared gangster who basically ruled Liari like it was his own personal kingdom. Then, standing against him, you have SP Chaudhry Aslam Khan, a police officer so famously fearless, they nicknamed him the Singh of Karachi. And then, lurking in the shadows, you have a figure known as Major Iqbal, a ghost, an alleged ISI handler whose name popped up in the investigations into the 26/11 Mumbai attacks. Now, you have to pay really close attention to the timing of all this. In November 2008, you have the horrific 26/11 Mumbai attacks. Right after that, India understandably ramps up its intelligence and coastal security in a huge way. Then, just 9 months later, in August 2009, the supposedly untouchable Rahman Dacoit is killed in a police encounter led by SP Aslam. His death kicks off a vicious gang war in Karachi that just rips the underworld apart. Fast forward a few years, and the Pakistani Rangers, with a lot of international pressure, start dismantling the whole criminal ecosystem. The sequence of events is, let's just say, very curious. And this is exactly where the story crosses over into the world of spies.
Now, of course, no government is ever going to confirm this, but some Pakistani journalists have hinted over the years that foreign intelligence, including India's, might have played a quiet role in all of this. We're not talking about direct raids or anything like that. Think more subtle, leaking key information, disrupting the flow of money, turning insiders against each other, basically weakening that entire criminal empire from the inside out. Right at the exact same time, India was seriously boosting its covert capabilities. And this brings us full circle, right back to the movie DHURANDHAR, because it shows why these stories we see on screen are so much more than just entertainment. They're actually a battleground, a battle for national narratives. I mean, think about it. America has been the absolute master of this for decades, right? Hollywood doesn't just make movies. It crafts a global image. Film after film, America is positioned as the world's hero, the savior, the great protector of democracy. It's probably the most powerful PR machine on the planet. And this is not just some abstract theory. This stuff has a massive real-world impact. Get this. After the original Top Gun came out, applications to join the U.S. Navy jumped by 500%. 500. A single movie directly influenced the recruitment numbers for a nation's military. That is the power of storytelling on screen. So the bottom line is this. Films like DHURANDHAR are being seen as way more than just box office hits. They're seen as part of a much bigger project, a project to build and shape a national story. They fire up patriotism at home, and they project a certain image of strength to the rest of the world. It's really about taking control of your own narrative before someone else does it for you. Which, of course, leaves us with a really big, fascinating question to think about. As movies become more and more ideologically driven, celebrating national pride on one hand and demonizing enemies on the other, where do we draw the line? Where does art stop and propaganda begin? It's a really complex debate, for sure, but it's one that films like DHURANDHAR are forcing all of us to have. So, what do you think?